Alright, another Sunday night here on the Reviewing Network Live, and you might have noticed that this week we did not have a whole lot of videos being put out there. There was a number of things about that, but we'll get to the number one reason, that is that our first full-length preview episode is now available for you to watch. It came out last Sunday night, and it's on our front page. You can check it out on the channel here as well. If you want to get a good idea of what the show's going to be like when we start going on September the 3rd, which is about 3 weeks from now, you can go ahead and check that out. I'll put a link to it in the corner here, and you can also look for the link at the end of the video, and also go to our front page. It's right there. Definitely check it out. Another reason why there was not a whole lot of videos this week is because we did not have a whole lot of trailers this week. We've been kind of getting into this lull on trailers. I don't know if it's because of the writers and actors strike or what, but yeah, it's definitely been a lull in what has been the usual... It's a lull in terms of new trailers to talk about, so that's why there's not been a whole lot of trailer reviews here. And the third and most important reason why there hasn't been a whole lot of content added on here since the preview episode went up is because I did Steel City Con this past week, and I have a couple videos over on the main channel, the Reviewing Network channel, so you go ahead and check those out. I'll put a link to one of the episodes there, and you can just go from there. It just ended today, and it's always a long, hectic weekend, and I went ahead and talked about some of the stuff in there that I picked up over the con, and also it's got some video of some of the different people walking around in costumes and all that. So you can go ahead and check that out over on the main channel. Like I said, I'll have a link to it on the corner here. So that's what's been going on here. We're going to be really quick about the box office this weekend because it is not an all that interesting box office. There's one thing that came out this weekend wide, and there's some other things in there that have a little bit of conversation we can delve into here, but we can be really quick on this one, particularly this week. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get right to it. Let's start with the top 5 films of the week. And coming in at number 5 is the lone new release of the weekend. Now, I thought that without Gran Turismo there to kind of take away this movie's thunder, I thought this movie we're going to be talking about here would have a pretty good shot of making more than what was expected to, but let's just say that the last Voyage of the Demeter really looks like it really is going to be the last Voyage of the Demeter, because this movie did not get the benefit of not having a big movie like Gran Turismo in front of it. It pretty much got exactly what probably would have happened if Gran Turismo opened up here, because people would have got to see that movie, and nobody went to go see this movie, unfortunately. The Last Voyage of the Demeter is the number 5 film this week, $6.5 million, which is not a good opening weekend, but it's even worse when you consider that this is not a movie this is not like one of those over $100 million movies that we've talked about that cost way too much money. No. This thing cost $45 million to make, and yeah, $45 million, and only brought in $6.5 million. This film, it's a bomb. It's a bomb, and I mean, there's a lot of things that we can look at here about why this movie bombed. Probably the one thing that comes to mind right off the top of my head is that it's another Dracula movie that we got from Universal, which comes not but 6 months after the last Dracula movie, with Dracula in it. But that one was the comedy Renfield, which I finally got to watch it recently, and it's a good movie. It's not a great movie per se. It's a film that's just okay for what it is, but I think Nicolas Cage really is the one great thing about the movie. I think he really is the strongest part of the film. I like Nicholas Hoult in there too, but it was certainly a letdown compared to all the hype that was building up towards it. But we have this movie here, and I feel like this is going to be, unlike Renfield, I feel like this is a movie that it didn't do, but it wasn't like a badly reviewed film. It did get mixed reviews. I think it's right in the middle of a 50% right now when I'm looking at the Rotten Tomatoes ratings that they have for it. And like I said, I don't usually like to look at that, but I'm just going off of that for this particular thing here. And the cinema score is a B-, so it did not get a good cinema score, but it does have its fans. I mean, there were people who praised the movie for some people from the Hollywood Reporter praised it. Trying to see who else did. Variety. No, Variety didn't do it. Vulture is what I'm thinking of. Vulture reviewed it positively. RogerEbert.com reviewed it positively. And even more so, people like Stephen King and Guillermo del Toro have expressed praise for this movie. King basically calling it a throat-ripping good time that reminds him of the best of the Hammer movies from the 60s and 70s, which I mean, Stephen King, as great as he is, his opinions can vary, but can alter big time. Like he doesn't like he doesn't like the Stanley Kubrick version of The Shining. I mean, let's just put it that way. But he decided to remake it in '97, and that one is much worse compared to the original Shining. But I digress. But Guillermo del Toro liked it too, saying it was gorgeous, lavish, and savage. And I mean, really, I haven't gone to see the movie yet because I've been so busy with Steel City Con, and I'm hoping that I can get to see it next weekend. I'm gonna hope that it has an early screening is next week, so I can go check it out because I really do want to see this movie. Because I am hearing a lot of good things from some people that I do talk to. They went to see it. They like the film. I'm not hearing a lot of really bad stuff from it from most people that I talk to, most of my friends online. So here's hoping I can get to see it next weekend. And I probably am going to have to try to see if it's there. If I can't make it, if it's not going to be there in an early screening next week, then I'll just have to wait for it to come out on Blu-ray, unfortunately. I really want to see this movie, though. I do think it looks pretty cool, so I'm definitely looking forward to checking it out. I'm kind of disappointed that Gran Turismo not being there. I keep saying Gran Torino for some reason. I don't know why, but Gran Turismo not being there should have helped this movie make some more money, but unfortunately, that was not the case. So The Last Voyage of the Demeter is probably going to dip off big time. It's another huge flop for Universal, a huge Dracula flop for Universal right in 2023. They had two of them in 2023, unfortunately. But yeah, one day is before the year is done. I will check it out, whether it's in theaters or on Blu-ray. I want to see this movie. I want to see it. I have heard a lot of good things about it. It looks pretty good, so I'm definitely gonna go in there with some good expectations for it. But so let's move on now to number 4, which was number 2 last week, and that is Make 2 the Trench. Obviously, kind of had a dip off from last week, where it was number 2 overall, which making $30 million, and it has dropped to $12.7 million, 57% drop off, basically 58%, 57.7. After 2 weeks, $54.1 million is the total gross for the film domestically. However, in terms of with the help of worldwide numbers, this $139 million budgeted film has already passed $256 million. So it is a hit, and we are probably definitely going to get to see another Meg movie coming up pretty soon in the near future. So hopefully it turn out to be a better movie than this one here, because I mean, really, it's like I said last week. It was I did not like this movie a whole lot. I thought the first half of the movie was not that great. Once they get going, though, it is fun, but it's kind of too little, too late to really get it going. So to really make it a great film. But I'm glad to see that it's making money. I really want to see what this guy can do with a third film. Hopefully, they'll give him the chance to let him do that. But like I said, not doing as well as the original Meg, but Considering that it's still doing better than I think a lot of people expected to for a sequel coming 5 years later, it's doing okay business, but it's mostly going to make its money back worldwide. So let's Make 2 the Trench. Let's get ahead and move on to the number 3 film, which actually moved up from last week, which was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem brought in $15.8 million, only dropping 43% from last week to bring its gross up to $72.8 million, which the movie cost between $70 and $80 million. So it's instant profit from here on out for this movie, and rightfully so. It's definitely one of the strongest films of the year. And I've read some interesting stories about this movie in the last week. More specifically, there was a story that came out after Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse where a lot of the people working on that film were extremely overworked during the production, and because of that, for this movie, the director of the film, Jeff Rowe, wanted to buck that trend, and he told he recently told this place called The Insider, that producer Seth Rogen helped him ensure that the animators on the film were not overworked and suffering, basically saying that the thing that was really important to us on the film, and learning that from Seth and Evan, because as in getting to know Seth, I'm like, he has a really good work-life balance, and everyone at Point Grey does. And he asked him about that, and he is like, well, what you're doing when you're doing live action, sometimes you're on set for 40 days in a row, and it's exhausting and tiring, and they want to make sure that our people have time away from that, and it doesn't become their entire lives, which is really interesting when you consider the fact that Seth Rogen pretty much, there were some notably infamously bad behind-the-scenes production troubles when they made Sausage Party. So it's kind of interesting that Rogen probably learned from that and realized that if he's going to do this again, he has to make sure that he does not do the exact same thing that happened with Sausage Party. Sausage Party is a fun movie, man, but yeah, the behind-the-scenes stuff on that movie, I heard, gets pretty rough. So it's very interesting to hear that they really took the time to let the animators live lives too, because like this, some of them were working 3 days a week, and the movie ends up being as great as it does. I mean, more power to them. I mean, do what you got to do, and hopefully you turn out a really good movie like this film does. And like I said, man, like I said last week, there's no real family competition for this coming up, except for Paw Patrol, which doesn't come out until September 29th. So it still has a good chunk of time to make some money back, and it's already going to make its profit back and then some. So I'm really happy that this movie's doing pretty well here. And in fact, the rest of the top movies of the week, I'm really happy are still doing well here, because back at number 2, after dropping down to 3 last week, was Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. And that brought in $18.8 million, only dropping 35% from last week. $264.2 million after 4 weeks. The worldwide gross for this is now $649 million. They're expecting this to hit $900 million once it's all said and done. One of the best movies of the year. Is easily in my top 3. What more can I say about it? It's Oppenheimer, man. Like, it's friggin' Oppenheimer. And the same thing can be said with our number 1 movie, which should not be a surprise to anyone whatsoever. Barbie is once again the number 1 movie at $33.7 million, and dropping only 36.4% from last week. And after 4 weeks, $526.3 million here in America alone, but worldwide, $1.19 billion. It's a phenomenon, man. Like, this movie is less than $9 million away from surpassing The Dark Knight as Warner Brothers' highest-grossing movie of all time. And it's still the number 1 movie, and still making over $30 million after 4 weeks. That's impressive, man, for a movie that was not expected to be... it was expected to be a hit, but I don't think anybody expected it to make this much money. And even Margot Robbie herself, basically... she pitched this movie as is literally saying that this is going to make $1 billion. Which they probably all I'm assuming they all say that to try to sell their movie. And sure enough, they make a great film like this, a very highly ambitious film, a movie that's still very funny and very well done, production-wise. Casting-wise, story-wise. What more can you say about it, man? This is a phenomenon. And it's very interesting to hear about what people are thinking about the longevity of this and Oppenheimer, because we're still in a writers and actors strike, and even though there's been some brief flashes of hope and promise because they're starting negotiations again, and this past Friday they actually did start the talks again. So let's just say that a lot of these movies coming up in the next couple of months get pushed back or so. There's a lot of people that believe that Barbie and Oppenheimer will still be making money for the studios by November. Like, we're experiencing something that we have not seen in a long time with these movies. We have a possibility of experiencing something like this that we haven't seen in a long time. We have these movies are in theaters for a number of weeks and months, and they probably won't make physical media or streaming for a while now, because we're kind of in this new situation now. It's very interesting when you look back on the way it used to be done, like in the 80s and 90s. Like, you have movies that come out in theaters, and they come out on video later on down the road, and it usually started off as this wide gap between movies. Like, a movie will come out in June of 1983 and won't hit video stores until June of the following year, because they want to see how long the movie plays out in theaters. Like, get something like an E.T. or an Indiana Jones or a Star Wars movie. Of course you want to keep it in theaters as long as you can. Hell, you'll even re-release the movie if you can't get it on video yet. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Empire Strikes Back, the original Star Wars, Superman, they were all re-released before videos came into play. And E.T. didn't hit video stores until 6 years after it came out in theaters, which is incredible to think about. And then slowly but surely, that gap started to go down big time, because most of these movies, when they first went to video, they were going straight to the video stores where you have to go and rent them, and you couldn't buy them right away. You had to wait a couple more months before you can eventually buy your own copy of it, unless the store was going out of business. And You know, I think one of the first examples of a movie coming out so quickly after the movie came out in theaters was Batman in '89, because that came out in June of '89, and then I think October of '89 it was released on video. That might have been one of the earliest examples of that, but it's interesting to think about that. You know, it's the gaps have slowly but surely started to shrink a little bit, because it used to be like 4 to 6 months. Like, I think Little Mermaid came out in November of '89 and then came out on video in May of 1990, which is about 7 months after the movie came out. That was considered short for Disney, because they usually waited a couple of years. They waited a long time to start putting their movies out on videotape. I mean, because they were still doing the re-releases in theaters every 7 years. And so that gap went from 6 months to, and there was a time like in the early 90s when they would wait a year to put these movies on video, like Beauty and the Beast waited a year, Aladdin waited a year, The Lion King waited a year, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan. I mean, they did that for most of their Disney animated classics back then. That they kept them waiting for almost more than almost a year to come out on videotape. And the gaps now have gotten much smaller. It used to be like a movie would come out in theaters in June and then be coming out on DVD or video, DVD or Blu-ray by November. But now that gap has now gotten so small, it could be like 4 months between a release. Like what happened with Guardians of the Galaxy. It came out in May of this year, and then in August we just got the video release of those. Sometimes it's now 2 months now, especially with Universal, because now they put these releases out there, and they hardly give anybody any time to really get ready for this, because they're just like, Minions: The Rise of Gru comes out in theaters in July of 2022, and then Labor Day 2022, it's already out on Blu-ray 2 months after it's come out in theaters. I mean, they wasted their time on that front. Like, the release patterns are getting much smaller and smaller in terms of from movie theater to home video, and it's going to be interesting to see if we see a little bit of a flashback with Barbie and Oppenheimer. Like, how committed are Warner Brothers and Universal to keeping these movies in theaters if the strikes keep going on here, and they need content to fill theaters? Because, you know, we still haven't found out if Dune Chapter 2 is going to get pushed back. We still haven't figured out if these movies that are coming out in November, like The Marvels and Trolls Band Together and Disney's Wish, like these big holiday releases, we still don't know if they're still going to be coming out in November or not. And I guess they're waiting. I think what they're doing is that they're waiting to see what happens with these movies that are coming out now, that have the advertisements going on right now, like stuff like Strays and Blue Beetle, Gran Turismo, and The Equalizer 3. I think they're waiting to see what happens when you don't have the celebrities to hype the movie up. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that pans out here. We're going to see that going into next weekend, which I'll get into those movies in just a little bit here. But let's talk about the rest of the top 10 here. We can be quick on this one as well. As far as the rest of the top 10 goes, no real surprises here. Haunted Mansion dropped another 39%. Still below what the original Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion was doing after its third week, so that's not good whatsoever. The worldwide gross for this is now $75 million, 52 of that's coming from America. $150 million movie, that's all you got to say about that one. But Talk to Me is still hanging in there, 19% drop-off from last week. It's $31.3 million for this movie right now. And they just announced the sequel this past week, so we're going to get the sequel to Talk to Me at some point. Sound of Freedom, I mean, it's still making money for $4.8 million, $172 million after 6 weeks. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 finally is starting to taper off the drops a little bit. $4.6 million, only a 29% drop-off from the previous week. $159 million. Still has a way to go in terms of domestic gross, but Indiana Jones finally dropped under $1 million. $899,000, $172.6 million. Like, I don't think anybody could have predicted that The Sound of Freedom of all movies would be making more money than an Indiana Jones movie. That's pretty depressing. So, that's pretty much the rest of the top 10 here. And next weekend's going to be very interesting for a number of reasons, because you've got a movie that could finally, maybe, possibly give Barbie a run for its money at the #1 spot, and that is Blue Beetle, which the tracking on this was not starting off strong, but slowly but surely the buzz on it has been growing. There's been some good word of mouth coming out from reactions online, from Twitter, but sometimes take those with a grain of salt, because most of the time those do not reflect the final outcome of the movie. I mean, these people gave praise to The Lion King, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, The Flash. I mean, really, like take those with a grain of salt. But I hope the movie's good. I mean, it looks like it could be a ton of fun. I'm not going in there expecting like a great movie, like on the levels of something like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, or something like on the lines of some of the greatest superhero movies of all time. If it's a good, fun movie, it should do perfectly fine. I think the word of mouth is growing strong enough that it could have an impact when the numbers come out, and it's going to be interesting how that pans out. And then you have Strays, which is the comedy with Will Ferrell and Jamie Foxx as dogs, is providing the voice of dogs, and it's directed by the guy who did a really good underrated comedy from a couple years ago, Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. And I'm really concerned about this one. I don't think this one's going to turn out as good as I hope it will, because the trailers for this have not been selling me whatsoever. The trailers have not been that funny. They haven't been that enjoyable to watch. But it is Phil Lord and Chris Miller producing it, and anything those guys touch, most of the time it will turn out to be a good movie. But I mean, Cocaine Bear is one of the best movies of the year, and that has their name attached to it. So, actually, does it? Actually, now I'm curious. Does Cocaine Bear have it? Yeah, it does. Okay. I don't know why I was thinking it didn't, but I mean, I hope it's good. But the trailers have not been selling me so far, and I don't think Universal's probably not going to be very happy to have another flop coming out after Last Voyage of the Demeter this week. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one pans out. But that's the two biggest new releases coming out next week. So it'll be interesting to see where those end up placing in terms of the box office. So other than that, though, that's going to do it for this. Thank you very much for watching. And like I said, check out the full-length preview episode on the corner here. Also subscribe to our channels here. And I will see you guys next time. So until then, take care.